Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Medboys Podcast. This is episode 2. My name is Nimit, and we're continuing with the theme of getting into your dream university. So, how are you doing today, Naman?
I'm doing great. I just got off of work. Like I said, I work at Kumon, so it was a tiring day. So joining you guys on the podcast was fun, I guess. How about you, Rushil?
Yeah, it was good too. Didn't have any work today. Honestly, just chilled. Did a bit of research on what I'm going to be doing for the upcoming winter semester that we have. And now we're here talking on our podcast. And speaking of our podcast, Nimit, would you like to explain, why we're actually doing this podcast in the first place?
Yeah, we actually forgot to talk about it yesterday. And the main reason we chose to start this podcast is because the three of us have very different and unique perspectives, with a science background, being med students, being brown people in Canada. And with our education and our research that we're doing, we also have a set of expertise that could let us talk about various topics that we think our audience would really like.
Yeah, I really agree with that. Rushil, did you want to talk about the IB program since we wanted to talk about how you could focus on your marks in high school and how programs like this could help you maybe get into university or maybe not?
Right. So, yep. As Naman just said, I had the pleasure of being part of the IB program along with Nimit and Naman. And as we mentioned in our previous podcast, we all went to Sorford Laurier at least for the first couple of years, and the first couple of years at least were considered pre-IB. This was essentially beefed up versions of the normal academic courses like English, math, science, stuff like that in general. And then grade 11 and 12 is where we got more specific with the differentiations of standard level and higher level, which are only differentiated based on the number of semesters that you contribute towards that course. In terms of the actual impact on my marks through the IB program, I feel as though the way that Laurier did it, at least, the conversion system was, I guess, in my experience, pretty lenient. In other cases, not so much. What I mean by that is the conversion system. It wasn't necessarily something to be relied on, but yeah, it wasn't necessarily something to be relied on. And Naman, you can expand a bit on that.
Yeah, so for those of you who are not aware, IB program is the International Baccalaureate program. It's international and it's found in many schools around Canada and all over the world, basically. And it's known for teaching you skills that are usually not taught in the regular curriculum in high schools, but it is a little tough, but it does a great job in creating a sophisticated environment for the students to learn in. It does impact your marks a lot because I mean, if you're focused enough, the conversions do benefit you, but they can also work as a negative factor. So I would actually say that the International Baccalaureate program, like the myth is that it helps you get into university. I would consider that a myth, but others might have different opinions. Now, we know that Nimit, he only did 2 years of International Baccalaureate program and he switched to a regular academic program. So Nimit, did you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Before I talk about that, I just like to backtrack a little into the actual application process of getting into IB. Like I applied to two IB schools, Sir Wilfrid Laurier CI and Victoria Park CI. For both of them, their application processes were quite different. For Victoria Park, you had to do a math test and then write an English essay of why you wanted to be in a program, and then do an interview in French. And that's how you got in. At Laurier, it was just a test that included all three aspects. And you just got an email later in the year telling you if you got in or not. In terms of what you said about switching from the IB program to regular school, one of the main things that the IB programs puts emphasis on is time management. And since the IB school I went to, Laurier, was semestered, I actually found it easier to cope with the amount of work I had compared to my next school, which was non-semestered, because I had to do 8 subjects at the same time. And even though it was considered at an academic level, um, I found the workload to be much heavier. Obviously, I can't attest to to the IB program because you guys were actually in it. But from what I saw, I found it pretty hard either way. And yeah.
Yeah, so to expand a bit on what Nimit was saying about the comparison between the academic and the actual IB subjects, the content was very similar in that sense. The difference mainly between the IB program and normal academic programs was the emphasis on independent work. There were these assignments called internal assessments that we were required to do as part of the IB program. And in my opinion, these internal assessments were ways to show your creativity as well as your ability to work independently. And again, as Nimit said, the major emphasis of the IB program is time management. And those internal assessments, you did have to balance with everything else that was going on in the IB program, as the course load, the coursework is fairly heavy. And it was just important that you took away something positive from that experience. And would you like to expand on it a bit more?
Yeah, so even though I did call this a myth, I'm not saying the IB program is bad in any way. It does help you a lot as a student to grow and expand on your own skills in general, because one of the main skills that IB teaches you, and I learned a lot, was risk taking. And that is also one of the reasons why I applied to so many programs or so many applications in university that I didn't want to apply to. For example, I applied to health sciences at McMaster when in high school. I just had a feeling that I wouldn't be able to get in because of maybe my low average or my less involvement in the community or something. But it's just that after my 4 years in IB, I had just had a thinking that I'll be able to take risks. So it'll be worth a try to apply to programs like this. But Nimit, did you want to talk about the health sciences program or how many programs you applied to?
Yeah. First of all, I just wanted to say and tell everyone that Naman's being a little modest. His average was low in terms of his standards. It still wasn't that low that you couldn't get into health sci. Um, but health sci is a very competitive program, especially here in Ontario. They only take 200 students out of maybe 4,000 applicants. So it's even harder to get into than med school. So there's a supplementary application and there's your marks. And we'll talk more about this in a dedicated episode with someone who's actually gotten into health sci and knows how to do it compared to us. But in terms of the universities I applied to a bunch of universities all across Ontario. I stayed primarily in province, and these include McMaster, Western, Ryerson, Guelph, York, U of T, obviously. And I think Rushil should talk a little bit more about how to get into these universities and just that application process in general.
Right. So, as you all know, as you'll learn, whatever grade you're in, normally by the end of grade 12, or sorry, the beginning of grade 12, you learn about how you apply, through OUAC if you're applying in province, stuff like that. So we're not going to get into the general admission process here. What we're going to talk about is sort of this idea that you need to get the highest marks possible in order to get into every single university that you want to, and that's not correct. For your marks, they don't really necessarily have to be high. A lot of these programs, like for example, University of Toronto, while there is a minimum average that you need to meet in order to get into the program, and there are many applicants to the program, they are generally pretty lenient with their acceptance rates, at least from what I've seen and the people that I've talked to. The same goes for Ryerson, Guelph, York, all of these other programs. And we're mainly talking about life sciences oriented programs here. Obviously, different streams like engineering place different emphasis on their marks and their extracurriculars. But any life science programs do not really place as much of an emphasis on extracurriculars. The only relevant sort of place that extracurriculars really matter, and in general your experiences, is your McMaster supplementary application for health sciences. In that application, as Nimit said, we'll be talking about that a bit later. In that application, you do get a lot of time and space to talk about your experiences through life in order to sort of, tell the interviewer exactly who you are. And yeah, that's just like the general gist of the admission process, at least for life sci. And would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that even though they are pretty lenient, and I have a lot of friends that did get into some of the programs that they just didn't expect they would get into. Like some of the programs, they would have a minimum acceptance average of 85 per se, and I've had friends who've had lower averages get into programs like that. So even though there is a focus on marks, but I'd say for programs like this, it's just an eliminating factor per se in the beginning. So you do have to stay focused on your marks in high school, and obviously that comes from practice, as Alan Iverson said. But in terms of extracurriculars, it's good to stay involved in your community, and with time management that IB has taught me, and Russell as well, you can stay focused and balanced with your marks and your extracurriculars. Um, and in terms of the admission process, it, it's very simple in terms of applying, but at the end of the day, it's your decision to decide where you actually want to apply to, and that comes from just writing down everything that you want to do. So when I was in high school, one of my older cousins told me that I should just write down everything that I want to do in the future. So kind of like making a vision board. And going on from there, I actually picked life sciences because even myself, calling myself Medboys, but even at that point, I wasn't sure where I wanted to go into. So I wrote down everything that I was interested in. I wrote down all the extracurriculars that I actually enjoyed, not just for my resume. And I found that I actually wanted to go into medicine because I genuinely enjoyed it, and it covered most of my day. But um, I guess that helps in deciding which university you actually want to apply to. But Russell, did you want to add on that?
Yeah, actually, I want to say that writing down your thoughts like that is actually a really, really good idea of visualizing your goals, because doing this allows you to, actually understand what you want out of where you want to go in life. For example, you wrote down your interests and you decide that you want to go to life sciences. This is a very general thing, but it's a very simple concept too. But if you try to apply it, like even to something as simple as, I don't know, your hobbies, even like you could figure out what your favorite sport is by writing, like, all of your experiences down. It's the same thing. It's just applied to a seemingly larger scale. And in that sense, it's just, it's very important that people understand that it may seem a bit time consuming at times. It may seem a bit pointless, but it is really important, writing down things like that. Anyways, Nimit, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, and in choosing which university is right for you, I think it's also important. First of all, obviously, you have to look at your marks and your extracurriculars to see which ones are actually reasonable to get into, and you should apply even if you think they're not reasonable. But you should also try to think of the non-academic things that you want in life. Like I know a lot of people that want to move out um, just because they want a change in their life, or there's a difference at home, or there's just some other reason they really want to move out. Some people might not move out for financial reasons because the tuition is considerably higher if you do move out. And it's just really, it's a difficult choice because you really have to know what your priorities are. And as these guys said, you have to write those down and make sure you make the right decision.
Yeah, Nimit, I actually agree with that. In terms of applying to multiple programs, I think it's very important to do that because as much as you want to apply to a competitive program, at the end of the day, you want to get into a good program or a university. So I think that applying to a backup program or multiple backup programs would just act as relief for you because it does get stressful those times, and you feel like your average is enough for you to just apply to one or two programs, which is not right. Um, well, at least I'll explain for myself. I actually applied to I think 4 or 5 programs. So I applied to U of T Life Sciences. I applied to McMaster Health Sciences. I also applied to York for, I believe, psychology, and I also ended up applying to Ryerson and Queens, all for the life sciences programs because I just decided before that I wanted to go into life sciences. But essentially, my first choice was McMaster Health Sciences, and my second choice was U of T, and those were rock solid. But the rest of them were just backup plans because um, I just wasn't aware if I could get into programs, if I could get into my first two choices.
And yeah, to add on to that, you may be going through your like interests, and you may think that, oh, I'm not really finding anything I'm like concretely interested in. I'm interested in multiple things. Oh, I want to do like a combination of something from engineering and something from life sciences. What do I want to do? Right? Let me tell you this, there are programs for everyone. These programs are designed to include every type of student. So you'll definitely find a program that fits what you're looking for from university, but it's up to you to look for that program. And it's, again, to emphasize the fact that you should keep your options open. While it isn't a necessity to keep your options open, it is like really recommended because let's say the application process is in January, it ends in January. You do have an entire semester of high school left. If you do experience any sort of epiphanies, like, oh, I want to change some sort of stream, I want to do some other program, you can have that option open for you.
Yeah, that's very true, Rushil. I wanted to bring it back to us a little. All three of us go to U of T, U of T Scarborough to be more specific. And I personally decided to go there because they had a neuroscience program. I've been interested in neuroscience since I was a kid, and it's also very close to home. So, Naman, what were the main reasons that brought you to UTSC, and what do you like most about U of T, and what are some things you might want to change or not so good?
So I think, yeah, I did apply to the neuroscience program, but to be honest, I actually wanted to go into cardiology because it was just something that I was very interested in high school. But I think that's something that lacked just in my surroundings, I guess, because I couldn't really find a program that was specific in cardiology. But when I actually came to U of T, I realized that all the programs were very broad. I don't want to say vague because that's negative, but they're broad in the sense that you could literally approach anything and you would get to it because there are so many options. So even if I am in neuroscience right now, I can still go into public health, or I can still go into a political stream or anything like that. I feel like U of T has like provided me like a sophisticated environment in which I can learn anything that I really want to. So it's been a very good experience for me in my experience. But Russell, what about you?
I just wanted to actually talk about the negatives that I've experienced at UTSC. While I reiterate all those positives, very good. UTSC is a very inclusive community, especially during the pandemic. It's sometimes a bit difficult to approach professors to get to know them better. And it's also, I feel, very hard to communicate and connect with your peers. It just seems that it's very scattered, and honestly speaking, I don't really enjoy the actual campus atmosphere as much. While there are some great times that I have had at UTSC, the overall campus atmosphere isn't as beneficial in my opinion. And with that being said, that brings us to the end of our second episode of the Medboys Podcast. We thank you all for tuning in, and we've got some exciting things planned for our future podcasts. We may or may not be bringing on a few special people to talk about some very interesting topics. So don't miss out. And as I've said in the past, you can contact us on any of our personal Instagrams if you have any questions about what we've said in this podcast, or if you want to know more. And that's all for today, guys. See you next time.